for his intervention, Mr. President.
Yeah, our distinguished colleague, Senator Cayetano, is recognized.
Good evening, Mr. President, dear
Good evening,
colleagues.
sir.
Mr. President, I wrote a letter and reserved right to the opportunity to ask questions vis-a-vis amendments. But since grabe na at exhaustive naman po yung discussions, may I just clarify yung question ng Majority Leader, then make maybe a short manifestation of my view on all of this, no? So yung first clarificatory question lang, ano ba yung industry standard pagdating sa administrative at operational cost?
Based on our studies, and this is financial literature that we have, our team has researched. The range is from 0.2 to 2%, depending, of course, on the size of the fund.
Okay. So since the law as written now, or the bill as written, is 2%, but it depends on the size of the fund. And aside from yung capital nito, palaki ng palaki, and then also yung mga ibang, yung list ng ipra-privatize, di ba? Isasama din dito, lalaki din. So can we actually benchmark na depende sa size ng fund na yon, kung ano, let's say, top 3 or top 5 or other funds of the same nature, kung ano cost nila, para lang may guidelines din yung board of directors nila that they have to keep within that. So I understand that we cannot put 1% now kung ang size niya actually, ang cost later is 1.5, or to put 1 kung kailangan niya talaga 2. But it's hard to put a sliding and a sliding scale of the cost, given that so the point I want to make is this, no? We want to put all of the safeguards, but we also don't want to handcuff the fund, no? So parang ganito yan, parang yung anak mo nagpapaalam mag-boxing. Ayaw mo ng boxing kasi alam mong it's a sport that can really, you can get hurt. Pero pag papayagan mo siya, you caution him, pero wag mo i-handcuff yung isa niyang kamay. Kasi lalong matatalo talaga. So we want to make sure that all the safeguards are there kasi public funds yan. But on the other hand, we cannot tell the board of directors, so 1% lang operating cost nyo when everyone else na yung same size is 1.5. So may I propose, Majority Leader, that we word it that way, if that's acceptable to the, you know, na in accordance with industry practices and benchmarking, but not to exceed nga what
Actually,
I don't know
the
pleasure of
wording
the
is
chairman.
not to
If I may.
exceed 2%.
Mr. President, if
So
I may.
it's not to go
Mr.
against.
President,
Yes,
if I
yes,
may.
ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we thank the good gentleman from the city of Taguig and Pateros for helping us out in crafting a more viable, more practical wording, Mr. President. And so, Mr. President, I will temporarily withdraw my proposed amendment here on page 6, line 31, but rather, Mr. President, we'll go later on page 7, lines 1 and 2, and as earlier agreed upon during the break with the distinguished sponsor, Senator Mark Villar, and this representation, we will carry also, Mr. President, the ideas and suggestions made by the distinguished gentleman from Taguig, Pateros.
Mr. President, may I have this opportunity just to make a manifestation.
Yes, please proceed.
So instead of asking the questions, and I've listened to the chairperson eloquently defend all of this, this is my personal stand on the issue, no? First of all, the sovereign fund is neither evil or good per se. It's like a gun. Kung nasa kamay ng police and it's for peace and order, de maganda. If it's in the hand of a kidnapper, de gagamitin sa masama, de masama. Ang baril ba ay pwedeng i-abuse? Pwede. Even without the fund now, all of these rumors about people in the admin planning to use public funds and to prop up maybe private businesses, you can actually do that right now, eh. Because the president naman appoints yung board ng SSS, GSIS, all the safeguards is also there sa SSS, GSIS, all the other GFIs, all the other GOCCs, central bank, no? Meaning kung gagawa ka ng kalokohan using all of these GOCCs at saka yung mga pera ng mga government financial institution, land bank, etc., you can do it without Maharlika Fund. Will it be easier with Maharlika Fund? Not if we pass the correct law with the correct safeguards, no? Now, if it is not inherently bad or good, then our duty is to pass a law that will make sure that the proper safeguards are there precisely para hindi ma-abuse at magamit sa masama, meaning yung public funds para sa publiko. But ito po yung tanong, if we put too much safeguards that you handicap it, that you basically handcuff the fund from competing, this is a fund that is going to compete with dozens of sovereign funds and thousands of private funds around the world, no? So we also have to be very careful that we pass a law that does not only have the safeguard, but we pass a law that will make sure that it succeeds. Di ba? So some of us don't want the fund because we think it's going to be used for wrong. If you want to vote against it, that's your right. Kung tingin yung walang kabutihan na itong fund na to, that's your opinion. We respect that. But dun sa atin na either mag-abstain o papayag, we have to make sure two things. Nandun yung safeguard, but we also have to make sure it works. Kasi that's going to be 500 billion pesos eh. If it doesn't work, hindi yung administrasyon na to mapapaya. Ang tao ang mawawalan. So what's basically my hesitance in supporting this 100%? My basic hesitance is the short term, yung pinaka-necessary ngayon. For example, no, education, and I really admire the work that Senator Ed Angara did, Senator Sani Angara is doing. Of course, our chairman for the last few years, si Senator Sherwin, si Senator Pia. No? But kaninang umaga pa kami tumatawag sa DepEd, they couldn't even tell us ilan schools ang half day sa ngayon. Ilan schools ang hindi whole day ang classes. Kasi for me, if there's one thing we can do to fix K-12, it's basically have enough classrooms, have enough teachers para 7 to 3 or 7 to 4, 8 to 4 yung pasok. And in that way, we fully utilize K-12. So what's my point? So I'd rather use that hundreds of billions to build classrooms. There's another argument. Secretary Jokno, who's sitting behind me, he knows very much yung admiration ko for him. Of course, our central bank head is here, of course, our NEDA head is here, and they would argue, di ba, the balance between, building schools and educating our children and also having funds that actually make money, di ba? So that's a whole 4-year course, pwera pa masteral in economics in any of our good schools. But my point is, Mr. President, that's my view, di ba? So if you look at agriculture, palaki na palaki yung population natin, pero ang ating growth flat lang yan, no? Yung growth ng productivity, no, yung production ng mga goods. If you look at transportation, for example, any city in Metro Manila, Cebu City, grabe na traffic. So aside from railways, we also need airports, seaports, etc. So I'd rather use the money for that. But there's an argument being made, and I think the good chairman made that this fund is allowed to do joint ventures. So hindi naman kaya ng mga gumagawa ngayon ng mga railways at saka ng mga highway na sila lang. And ako, I've always said, kumikita tong mga to eh. So why doesn't government go into it? I've said that sa CA na bakit yung pag-ibig, yung GSIS, SSS, yung investable funds nila, why don't you also go into the paid highways? Because anyway, wala naman nalulugi doon. They're making money at hindi naman kaya ng private sector, no? So the bottom line for me, Mr. President, is we have to align the priorities of this fund and then do the more major reforms sa General Appropriations Acts of 2024. So I can criticize to death and say that dapat yan 500 billion gamitin sa school building, but if we can somehow fix that sa GAA in 2024, then we'll have both. We'll have a Maharlika Fund that deals with the specific objectives, and then you will also have the classrooms that you need. If you look at the DPWH budget, almost one-third of the budget goes to flood control and to maintenance. That's around 300 billion pesos. That's more than half of this fund. No? So if you try to correct, the over-reliance on maintenance and flood control and build more productive infrastructure, I can argue both. I can argue you don't need this fund, or I can argue then this fund will be better off because we can realign and use that. No? So the point I want to make, Mr. President, is that Senator Bam Aquino filed a similar bill during the end of President Aquino's time. I was reading to see whether he's for or against it now, and sabi lang niya yung timing. I had a deep thought on this, because kung na-file kaya ito nung Duterte administration, would I support it or not? No? And I came to the conclusion that I would. But I would still push for the proper priorities now, which is sa agriculture, sa health, sa education. The latest statistics still show that 6 out of 10 Filipinos die without seeing a doctor. And 16,000 barangays still do not even have a primary health unit. No? Walang health center. Again, one way of dealing with this is to get that 500 billion and to put it there. Another way of doing it is to make sure this fund succeeds and to grow this fund, but then to reform the 2024 budget. No? So I'm waiting to see. I mean, if the consensus of this body is to pass this fund, wag lang natin ipasa ito na may tamang safeguard. Ipasa natin to make sure that it meets its objective na kumita to and the money goes to the Filipino people. So that's my 3-minute version of what should have been a 6-hour interpellation. Pero dahil puyat kayong lahat, I will keep it there and then just try to explain my vote.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleague from Taguig and Paternos.
Well said.